Okay, so hello everyone, my name is Ramon, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Weimar Republic and Nazism. Well, so my objectives in this project are...
You can remove the mask if you want,
Okay.
Ramon, sorry.
Got it. Thank you. So my objectives are to introduce the Weimar Republic, explaining how Germany overcame the economical and political crisis, explain the needs of Germany after the First World War, how and why the Nazism was established in Germany, and explain how Nazi propaganda helped to spread the Nazi ideology, what were the concentration camps, and the baby factories. So, history. We all have already studied history, and it is fundamental because it's the best way to know what happened in the past and avoid committing similar mistakes nowadays and in the future. So, knowing it, I want to go back on 1914, where the whole world was under the imperialism system, regime, where power meant colony, territories. So the country that had more colony, more territories, more land was the most powerful. And in search for more power, they started invading each other's territories. So it started uniting little wars, small wars, and all of a sudden those wars came up together and the world divided into big groups of big countries and ignited the First World War. So the Weimar Republic was a republic that started on 1919 and lasted till 1933. So in 1919, that was the end of the First World War, and Germany lost this war, and the population didn't want the country to be in war again, and didn't want to be in war at first place. So when they lost, the light that was in charge, the monarchies, ran away because they were scared that the population would rebel and would overthrow the government that was there. So when they ran away, the Democratic Party took control, the SPD, the Socialist Party of Germany, took control, and in February 1919, they wrote a constitution in the city of Weimar. That's why it's Weimar Republic, because they wrote and they officially settled the Republican system in the city of Weimar on August 1919. Well, this republic was quite simple. They had the parliament, the Reichstag in German. They had the politicians that were elected by the citizens, and the president and the chancellor. The president was like a figure. The president didn't have a lot of power. He just could nominate the chancellor, and this guy, he was the head of government, responsible for the executive power. So the president was just a figure, and the chancellor was one that actually ruled Germany at that time. Some historians say that the republic was doomed, was fate to an end since its beginning, because Germany, like the First World War busted, almost 20% of male population was killed or bruised. They had almost no army because the Versailles Treaty obligated them to reduce its armed forces to almost 100,000 men. It was like just a little bit of what they used it to be. They also had almost no territory because the clauses obligated the country to give the territory away. And they also had to pay a huge bill. It was about $27 billion back in 1929, so it was a lot of money. And it's all just because all the blame was put on Germany. Like the war just happened because Germany did it and it. So the other countries just put all the blame on them, on German people. So in this scenario, the population were too mad at the government, and in 1918, Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, Rosa and Karl, created the Spartacus League. It was a league, a Marxist and Socialist league that had the goal to spread the socialist and Marxist idea all around Germany. They were bonded with the SPD party, the Democratic Party, but they disrupted the political bond because they weren't sharing the news, they weren't sharing socialism to the people, and also because they were being too patriotic. They wanted to be in war, they wanted to conquer the whole world too, and these guys didn't approve of it. So they created a new party, the KPT, the Communist Party of Germany. And from now on, this party became a threat because nobody wants a communist party on a country. So the governors, the chancellor, started to worry about it. And the chancellor back then was Gustav Stresemann, this guy over here. He was a political of German People's Party. He was the German chancellor from August 1923 to October 1929. And he did a lot of good things, such as reconcile with the Allies outstanding France, because France was the biggest potence back then, the biggest country. He also reviewed the clauses of Versailles Treaty, such as the bill and the bill they had to pay and the army thing. He also got a good affinity with the Soviets, made Germany rejoin the League of Nations, but he was problematic, like such problematic. He would approve any military intervention if a group of people or if someone started opposing his ideas. So if he was, I don't know, extreme left, he would send army to kill all the extreme rights people that would follow the idea of the ideologies. So anything that went the opposite of what he thought it should go, he would just kill. But even though he was good, as I said before, all of his successful was due Charles G. Dewey's, the guy that wrote the Dewey's Plan, which was a provisory plan with the intention to resolve the issue of the First World War reparations that the country had to pay. So that guy, this guy, he hardened up the economy by this plan, so Germany could only rejoin the League of Nations because the economy was better and just because of this guy over here. So Friedrich Ebert, this guy with this pretty mustache, they like it a lot, mustache. He was the leader of the army and the president from 1919 to 1925, which means him and Stresemann were the most powerful people on the Weimar Republic. Because besides being president, he was also the leader of army. So they were quite friends because this guy elected Stresemann, as I said before, the president would elect the chancellor. So this guy elected, he appointed him to the role, and he was really powerful. Considering that he was friends with Stresemann, they could do anything they wanted because back then in the constitution was wrote that if the country was ruined, if the country was under emergency decree, they could do whatever they wanted, such as enacting and writing any law, and this law would be approved because they didn't need to hold a powwow with the parliament. They didn't need to consult the parliament. So, considering that he was the leader of the army, he hired the army militia called Freikorps. These guys over here with the little skull here. Anyways, they were free agents. They were volunteer military that worked for governments, but like not just German, but like Britain, France. They were like free agents, and this guy Ebert hired them to murder Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, because as I said before, the communism was a threat to the country, and they didn't want the communism to raise, so they the army militia, the Freikorps, killed them. And in 1923, a few months after the murder, the Beer Hall Punch happened. It was organized by the KPT party, the party that Rosa and Karl created, and it was organized by Adolf Hitler. But the putsch failed, and the leader, Hitler, was arrested. And during his time in jail, he wrote the book, Hitler. He wrote the book, My Struggle, and the content of the book was almost only about Aryan race. He said that German people were superior to the others just because they were Germans. Also, that they had to have a living space. They should live in bigger houses than Jews, for example, because they were superior to them. And also that German people, that Aryan people, had the right to colonize more lands. So France can't colonize more lands, but I can because I'm German, I'm Aryan. Everything was kind of okay, like controlled, but all of a sudden, Frederick passed away in 1925, and the country needed to make an election. And in this election, Paul von Hindenburg ran it, and he won, this guy here. He was a war hero and a monarchist. But you start to think, like, it was a democratic system. Why would they elect a war hero and a monarchist? That was all the things they didn't want to go to be in charge. You don't want to have a monarchist in charge. But considering that the economy was ruined, they thought that if they elected a guy that was a monarchist, that was extreme right, the country would get better. And it kind of did, until October 1929, when Stresemann died due to a disease, and Great Depression and the financial market crashed. So it was a time that the whole world was facing a huge economical crisis. There then happened the Black Thursday, where people jumped out of bridges and buildings because billions of dollars were lost. So all the loans that the United States, for example, lended to German business, German companies, were took off because the whole world was crashing, economically speaking. And by that time, the hunger and employment increased like a lot, because people were already in a bad situation, and then the economical crisis came and rocked the whole country. So unemployment and hunger were on their apex. So this is a graph here with a list of chancellors of Germany. You can notice that until von Papen over here, the government would last like, I don't know, over here 20 years or 5 years. And when the Republic began, just like people last for like half year, 1 year, 2 years. So it became very bad to the country because it was totally unstable. You cannot predict who is going to be in charge like tomorrow, because he could be dead, because the guy could be dead, or he could forsake the title. So it was really bad for the politics. Okay, so in 1930, the alliance between Republicans and center parties was ruined because of the financial crisis. And Paul, the president, decided to dissolve the parliament because he had to go to weaken the SPD party. As I told you, he was a monarchy, so he didn't want to have a democratic party control. So he tried to weaken the SPD party, which had more supporters. And in this re-election, unfortunately, to Paul, the SPD party was still the first one with most votes, but the KPD, the Communist Party, and the NSDAP, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, was the third one. So the Communists were the second, and the Nazis the third one. So extreme left and extreme right. When he saw the results, he got like mad because he didn't want to have extremist politicians in minority in the parliament. So he started to pick like politicians that was from center and not extremes to cabinets. Like they were, for example, my mother was elected, but I want to Dambrosas be the president, for example, and he could do that. By that time, population started noticing that the democratic system was almost gone, because they voted for someone and this someone wasn't elected, but a person that they didn't even know was elected. So they noticed that it didn't make sense to vote in first place. So in 1932, there was another election, because like I said before, it was elections and elections, and Hindenburg was re-elected, but he almost lost to Hitler. So the situation was really worrisome, and by that time, He was trying to enact laws to try to save the country, like economically speaking, but he was failing at all laws he tried to enact because he lost all his political support because all people started to support Hitler's ideas. So Franz Papen and Alfred Hindenburg and company man in general started influencing Poe to appoint Hitler as chancellor, saying that if he did that, most population would support him because he was elected. So a lot of people still wanted him in power, but also Hitler had a lot of supporters. So if he mixed both on the government, it would be okay. So he did that. On 1933, the nationalistic parties gathered with the NSDAP, the party of Hitler, the Nazi party, supporting Hitler as chancellor. And from now on, so Poe died after, and the Nazi party merged the role of president and chancellor into one, called Führer. So there is no more president and a chancellor, but just Führer, which was Hitler.
The supreme power.
Yeah. So nice. So Hitler on power. On the first weeks and first months, he set the F word Reichstag on fire. And this is a picture of the building on fire. Well, there was still a parliamentary system, but this is a symbolic act to say, I am the guy in power. You can't do nothing anymore. I am the power. I am the state. So on March 23rd, 1933, he enacted a law where all parties other than Nazi were banned, and the Nazi party had no need to require the assent of the parliament, so they could enact any law they wanted, even though the country wasn't under emergency decree. And this is the formal basis of Hitler's power during so many years, to the reminder of the Third Reich, which lasted until 1945. So Hitler, he was the head of the Nazi party and also a supporter of the Nazi ideology, of course. Here is the flag of Nazism, Nazi party. So Nazism was and is a form of fascism, which is against liberal democracy and parliamentary system. So it was totally the opposite of what was going on during the Weimar Republic. They supported anti-Semitism, anti-communism, scientific racism, and period of eugenics, which means they didn't like Jews, they didn't like communists, they didn't like non-Aryan people that were in German, and they also said they were superior and these kind of things. So Nazi propaganda. Back in 1933, most people used it to catch up on news by radio. So Joseph Goebbels, this guy around here, who was the propaganda minister, noticed that he could manipulate everyone to support the Nazism by just broadcasting the Nazi party speeches. So the other parties were banned, but there was a lot of people that were against the system, they were against Hitler, and they couldn't have voice, they couldn't convince other people to follow them. So they made this law that just the Nazi party could broadcast. And he also created this catchphrase that translated to English means a radio in every German house, which means that every house should have a radio so that they could create only one opinion. The Nazi ideology would be spread to the whole Germany and everyone would listen to the atrocities that they were saying, which caused it mass manipulation because everyone was listening to the same thing and repeatedly, and they started thinking that it was good, but it wasn't. So besides radio, they also used public loudspeakers. So if you weren't at home and weren't listening to the radio, like if you're at school or hospital, you still listen to Hitler's speeches because there was a lot of loudspeakers on there, and they would transmit they would also broadcast the speech. So the concentration camps. The first one was built in the shop on 1933. And in these camps, Jews' lives were taken by malnutrition, disease, and overwork. But it wasn't just Jews, but also homosexuals, physically and mentally ill, intellectuals, artists, everyone that weren't Aryans. Also, a curiosity, the propaganda minister was also the guy which is now known as the guy who burned books, the guy that didn't like books, because you know why. 20,000 concentration camps were created back then, and about 20 million people got arrested or killed during that time. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 zeros. It's a lot of people. So this is the Dachau camp, the overview of it. It's the first one, and these other two pictures are the Auschwitz one. This is the gate, the entry, and this is a picture with 5 pictures. The first one are children that were kidnapped and locked down on those camps. Here it's a furnace. I don't want to tell why it's a furnace, but I guess you all know. Here are dead bodies, a lot of bodies, and here are random people. The baby factories. The objective was to raise pure kids, Aryan kids, so that these kids could conquer the whole world. So Hitler had this idea that Aryan people were stronger and were more intelligent, so they had to conquer the whole world. So these Lebensborn, these baby factories, had full support of the government. Here is a picture, I'm sorry. It's a picture of women taking care of children, and you can notice that it's all like white women, blondie, children, so Aryan stereotype. And back then on Germany, kidnapping and raping were normal because Hitler wanted to have a bunch of babies on these factories because he wanted to try new things to see if the kids would grow up being Nazis and supporting his ideas. So they started to search for women who wanted to have kids, and when the kids were born, they would kidnap these kids to grow up in these factories. And if women refused to have kids, the government would send men to rape the woman so that she would get pregnant, and then when the baby is born, they would kidnap the baby from the mother, and the baby would go to the factory. It's like awful, like how can there? It doesn't make sense. But anyways, the conflicts. Hitler rebuilt the armed forces beyond what was allowed by the Versailles Treaty. So it was only 1,000 men, 100,000 men, but he didn't care, and he started recruiting more men to be in the army. So then he could invade Austria in 1938, Czechoslovakia in 1939, and tried to invade Poland in 1939 also, but Britain and France didn't like it and countered any aggression by sending their army to the Polish security. So they didn't give up, they lost that war, the conflict, but they didn't give up and they tried again on September 1st, 1939, and they successfully invaded, but they also ignited the Second World War, and that's when the whole S word started. War period. During the war period, all the bad things, such as the concentration camps and the kidnapping, the raping, kept happening, but even worse. So, because they were invading more lands, they were conquering more territory, and new kids were being kidnapping, and more women were being raped, and the numbers of these baby factories, of the people that were in those baby factories and on the concentration camps, were increasing, and so the kids were kidnapped in foreign lands, and the women were raped on foreign lands. And the concentration camps were filled with people, because each time they invaded some place, they would kidnap more people to be on those concentration camps, working as slaves and these kind of things. The end of Nazi Germany. In an attempt to invade the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, they tried to invade it, but it was winter and on the now Russia is very cold. Back when it's in winter, it's cold. Just give me a second. It's cold, and the whole army was killed because of, or they died because of the cold, or they died because somebody killed them. And by that time, the Soviets noticed that they could successfully defeat Hitler, and that's what they did. So they invaded Berlin. Hitler's army lost, and Hitler and his partners killed themselves on April 30th, 1945. So Germany surrendered the war in May, and the war ended in September. Okay, so a curiosity, I guess. Oh, it's forget it. Conclusion. The Weimar Republic failed because of 6 reasons. 6 main reasons. The first one is because Germany was an undemocratic nation, which was forced to become a democratic one. So they weren't used to vote for people. They weren't used to be a part of the government, to have a important role in the politics. Second reason, the constitution didn't limit a number of active parties. Germany reached a number of 40 active parties. So, as I said before, it wouldn't help to establish the political area of Germany. Like, new candidates would run elections, and each year it would change the chancellor. It just made a mess. Third reason is because there were no revolution on how to join parliament. So if I want to be a political and I'm a friend of the chancellor, I can be, because he would go, okay, you can't go and be a politician. So I could go and I could rule the country if I wanted to. If the president picked me to be a chancellor, for example, I could. The president could do anything under emergency decree. The government didn't last for long enough. And the financial crisis came and rocked the whole country. Nowadays, there's the United Nations, the UN, which has the goal and the objective to avoid fascism or any kind of fascism, such as Nazism, establish peace and equality all around the world. So the countries have this alliance that they agree to not fight, to not war anymore, so that it would avoid anti-communism, anti-racism, anti-Semitism, not anti-racism. So it was supposed to be playing a song, but I forgot it. But anyways, the song said, translated to English, somewhere in the world there's a little bit of luck, and I dream of it every moment, somewhere in the world. It was sang by comedian harmonist and Jack Gibbons. He was a son of one of the singers. He said here, 3 of the group members were Jewish or of Jewish descent and were forced to flee Germany. So they wrote the song before Hitler became the Führer, and was like, okay, I need to find somewhere in the world where this guy doesn't rule, where this guy doesn't exist, so I can live in peace, because their lives were in danger because they were Jews. So they were begging for help to find a place where they could live in peace. And it was supposed to play another song called Gimme 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 by ABBA, but it's just because I wanted to show this girl. She's a singer. I guess you all know this song, it's very popular. I cannot actually play now, but it's really fast. This song. I guess we all know this song. And this girl grew up on a big factory. I actually don't know if she was kidnapped or her mother gave her to the factory. But anyway, she grew up on one of those, and it's an example of how Nazi Germany was really bad. She did some interviews and she talked about it. I actually didn't read any of those, but anyways. So thank you all. I wanted to end up this presentation with this phrase of Mahatma Gandhi that says, be the change you wish to see in the world. So if you want to see anything changing, study history, study what happened in the past, make an analysis, and talk to the others and say, oh, it cannot happen again. You can do this. Study it so we can avoid committing the same mistakes we committed in the past. And that's all.